I hope you have all found the conference valuable and interesting. It's good to be in Cape Town. It's good to be away from cold London and cold Norway, which is where we are from, Rystad Energy. We are a Norwegian business intelligence company. But it's not all about us. I'm here to moderate the topic, Africa's Just Energy Transition, a roadmap to ending Africa's energy poverty. And I would like to, oh, excuse me. Yeah. So I'd like to call the speakers on stage right away. I would like to start with Dr. Jane Allwatch, Executive Director of the Southern Africa Science Service Center for Climate Change and Adaptive Land Management. Is she here? Okay. If she's not here, then we would, I'll just call on Joseph Abramovitz, Nobel Peace Prize nominee, CNN Green pioneer, and President and CEO, Gigawatts Global Cooperative. I'd like to call on Gracia Muganga, Chief Operating Officer, Sustain Solar. Ambassador Dr. J. Peter Pham, former United States Special Envoy for the Sahel region of Africa. And last but certainly not the least, Florival Mukave, Executive Chairman, Mozambican Oil and Gas Chamber. Okay, we are all seated. Fantastic. So I'll just quickly run through the room to start by asking you what it is that you do. I mean, I've only just mentioned your names and your positions, but it would be nice to know a little bit, just a little bit more about yourself. I'd like to start with Peter, Ambassador Peter. Is that okay?
Okay. Thank you very much, Bimbola, and thanks to the organizers for putting together this panel, especially the topic. It's seemingly abstract in a conference where we have a lot of very concrete things to discuss, but I think it's a very important one. My name is Peter Pham. Formerly, I served as the ambassador and U.S. Special Envoy for the Sahel region of Africa, which gave me a mandate to cover everything from the Mediterranean down to the Gulf of Guinea. And before that, I was the U.S. Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region of Africa, covering the countries of the Great Lakes region from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. One of the little secrets in the U.S. government is how to achieve the most with the least amount of resources and human capital. So when I was appointed Special Envoy for the Sahel, they didn't bother to replace me in the Great Lakes and kept me doing the job without an additional remuneration, unlike the private sector. But I come to this from a long history of working in Africa across various regions, in academia and in the think tank community. And now that I've finished my government service, I'm back in the private sector, both as a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank and a number of corporate concerns and boards. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter. It's very nice to have you here. Thank you. Joseph, would I please tell you to introduce yourself a little bit more? You are a Nobel Peace Prize nominee.
It was 12 African countries that did it, not me.
So if we want to talk about decommissioning coal, decommissioning oil and gas, we have to look at substitutes. We have to look at harmonizing African rules and regulations for us to be able to trade regionally and perhaps sell our LNG locally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One thing for sure is 1 in every 4 people by year 2100 will be African. So energy poverty is not an African problem. This is a global problem. What role do developed countries have to play in helping to address the energy poverty in the continent right now? Ambassador Pham?
I would say they have a great moral responsibility, but they also have a responsibility. because nations have interests. It's in their own self-interest as well as, so there's the moral and ethical part, which I hope they're here, but there's also in their own interest. But it's only in their own interest. Forgot, we're back in, we have power again. But it's only in their interest if African countries and African leaders put it in those terms. I think there are a number of opportunities here. I spoke earlier about the critical minerals and materials needed to achieve decarbonization around the globe, many of which are sourced to Africa. That's an opportunity for Africa to exercise some political leverage, but also economic leverage, beneficiation, which will then segue into building demand, which then provides an opportunity for the internal markets. So all this, Ventura, just to stick with the same examples, 70% of the cobalt needed for all these wonderful new things that we want, all these electric vehicles, is sourced from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And yet 80% of the processing occurs in China. First, shipping the ore all the way there is hardly carbon neutral. It's hard, but why isn't the beneficiation occurring in the DRC? And certainly, given the DRC, that creates a demand for hydro and others. But leave open the door in certain places in the country. I can think of where the mine is not located near any source of water that I'm familiar with. Then you're going to have to use fossil fuel. Whatever it is, that creates a demand, which then you can create a virtuous circle. So my answer is the international community has a moral obligation, but if African leaders and African countries make it so geopolitically and geoeconomically, they also have something far more powerful than moral suasion. They will have their own self-interest, the international community, into helping Africa achieve its end to energy poverty.
Thank you, Ambassador Pham. Floreva, your thoughts on that? What do developed countries, what role do they have to play in helping elevating this energy poverty in the continent, knowing fully well that by 2100, 1 in every 4 human is African or will be African?
First of all, the developed countries have to look at Africa as a viable market. I think really we have to start by looking at Africa as a viable market and what does it entail to be a viable market. When Western countries start looking at Africa as a viable market and having a long-term perspective of the potential of Africa, clearly there will be a mind shift in the Western world. Because, for instance, having a conversation today whereby, notwithstanding the source of hydrogen, low carbon natural gas, we have to stand from a point of needing to convince Western countries actually to work with us in the development of those resources that are actually beneficial to the earth and beneficial to Western economies. It clearly indicates that we're not conversing as yet. There's some sort of monologue happening. And unfortunately, that monologue is not constructive to the development of the global economy. So once we stop the monologue and Western countries call us to the table to understand what contribution can African countries make going forward, certainly we'll start understanding each other and we'll definitely find solutions. And really it's about us sitting at the table or them calling us to the table to converse and find solutions that are acceptable and enabling to the development of African economies. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, Joseph?
Two things. One is it'd be great if there was a massive technical assistance revolving loan fund that would be very easy to access, that would be self-regenerating, and that could be used across the continent with little bureaucracy to do all the studies and to kind of lower the risk for the private sector to be able to come in. Some won't be repaid, and the ones that are repaid have them repay it at 1.5 times. So it keeps going. But there's so many little things here and there, and it's so hard to get that it's a disincentive for the private sector. The other is that, you know, I work with many of the development finance institutions, and thank you, and they're great, and, you know, couldn't do it without DFC and others. But instead of going, you know, project by project, I think it's time for platforms. I think it's Pan-African or regional platforms to invest heavily in those, particularly ones with a track record. So you know, you know where I'm coming from. But we would do a lot more faster because I think speed is important, and also a portfolio approach is important. You know, I mentioned we're in a lot of countries, but you know what? Ethiopia's on hold right now, but we're able to move forward on the other ones. And so platforms enable a portfolio approach.
All right, thank you. I think Gracia wanted to make a point as well, didn't you?
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
thanks. I think it's actually my point built on what Joseph has said quite well. So, you know, the role of developed countries in the off-grid sector, I think it's important to recognize that there has been quite a lot of effort, both from a technical assistance perspective, you know, blended finance, sometimes grants to support the development of projects, sometimes actually over a decade, right? The point you make is it's you know, it's not working as fast as it should. The bureaucracy is making it super difficult, etc. But there are, you know, existing programs with the ambition to scale and help reach SDG 7. So Power Africa is one of them. Get Invest is one of them. The other one from, I think, UK Aid is Transforming Energy Access. And as a supplier to the off-grid sector, the clients would be our developers. We have supported them in the applications and the implementations of those projects. The last point I wanted to make, because I've got the platform, is to respond to our clients' biggest headache, which is fast, effective access to finance. We've developed our own in-house asset finance facilities, and so we pre-finance the generation assets, which would be the containers. What that does to a developer, one, it reduces the amount of debt he needs to raise because the generation assets are covered and you only need to raise the debt for the distribution assets, essentially. But also, it enables you to scale up because our systems are modular based on the demand that you are seeing. A lot of the donor programs currently are result-based financing, like in Nigeria, where you need to have actually built the system before you can access the grant. And so we enable you to achieve that a lot faster. So the point I would like to make to DFIs is invest in us. We will scale the sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for injecting that bit into it. Just a few more questions, and I'm going to put an end to this. The European-African dialogue on green transition, acknowledging the different perspective and own needs and looking for win-win opportunities rather. Let me take that again. Is the European-African dialogue on green energy transition acknowledging the different perspective and own needs while looking for win-win opportunity? And this is definitely going to Joseph and Gracia. I had both of you in mind when I put this question together. Who wants to go?
So I actually am not familiar with the, I have this, the UK, which I know is not officially part of Europe anymore, they are hosting COP26, and they've put their money where their values are. I have to say, there's so many different facilities there, and I think that as a percentage of foreign aid per capita, they're really way ahead of everybody else. So I do want to acknowledge that, and they tend to be very creative. We're starting to do local currency PPAs because of them. But the FMO, the Dutch Development Bank, has been great, Norfund and others, and there's been a mixture of technical assistance in kind from BOI and from others. So, but it is exactly this patchwork, and it's not clear enough. And I think, I mean, there are historic relations between certain European countries and certain countries here, And I do, I forget the term you used, but yeah, there's a moral case to be made. They should increase it, make it clearer. And I don't like these grant facilities that it's only after you do it, because it just feels too risky and you can't work quickly. But I think Europe has a historic correction to make. And doing this and scaling this, and they're the ones driving COP26, guys. I mean, they're the EU, 55% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and so, and they're probably the ones holding your debt that I want them to forgive. So, but up the ante to the Europeans, but we also couldn't do it even today without them.
Correct. So I think you said it all. Yeah. Not much to add there. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Gracia. Thank you, Joseph.
I would add one little note on, since on the Europeans, though. It's very easy, and this is the one thing they need to be called out on. It's very easy to talk about lowering emissions and all that, because your demand is already going down with demographic decline. Whereas Africa, as you just mentioned, 1/4 of the world's working age population within our lifetimes of many of us in this room is going to be one quarter of the world's population. When you have a demographic increase, demand's going to go up, even if God forbid individual demand doesn't. So I think that needs to be called out, and I don't see that in the conversations.
Interesting, yeah. But I mean, again, as you say, it needs to be called out. So this is food for thoughts for everyone here listening, and there's a reason we're all here. It's to ensure this energy poverty situation comes to an end. Now, Gracia talked about funding on the renewable side and what they've been doing on the off-grid solar space. The continent, of course, requires a significant level of investment if a transition to renewable, which I don't know. I mean, please don't quote me. I don't think a transition would happen just like that. It's going to be a case of working side by side. And if we're to make energy poverty history by 2030, so what strategies can be implemented to ensure the energy sector revenues are reinjected directly into the Africa renewable path or plan? I'll put that to Gracia, because you have been you've been able to start some sort of financing on your side without having to wait for international bodies. So.
Let me just thanks a lot. Let me just repeat the question just so that I understand. So yeah. the question that you're posing is what strategies are required to ensure that revenues from the energy sector is reinvested in the communities?
Into the renewable space, of course.
Into the renewable space. Yeah. So it's, for me, that question is double-edged sword, because if you look at the power sector on the continent, excluding oil and gas, which is sort of the cash cow, I mean, utilities across, I think there are 2 utilities that are cash positive, right? Utilities have had to be, one, subsidized and or supplemented, etc. So the point about where do we get, let me say, maybe the capital or the resources to invest in renewable energy, I think, one, there needs to be a commitment at national level. And I think that the AMDA report, but also the experience, you will probably confirm that, shows that the moment that you've got, one, the enabling environment, 2, a little bit of public money, it's able to multiply, multiple times, 1, crowding development finance, private sector capital, and potentially grant. And that's how you're able to achieve the scale that the sector requires. And there are, I think, various examples where that has happened successfully relatively. I think Uganda to some extent, Sierra Leone, Nigeria currently with the World Bank RBF facility, etc., etc. So I think that's one of them. The second one is, and I'd like to address it, is this idea that renewable energy should be 20 times cheaper compared to a grid-connected tariff. And the problem there is we're not looking at the real cost. We're not looking at the real cost of the, 20 cents or so that maybe the DRC is currently charging its customers when there is power potentially, and or in other countries. And with utilities, with national governments and the private sector, this is a conversation that hopefully the public sector feels comfortable having going forward. The comparing, it's not comparing likes for likes. The private sector is in it to, at the very least, recover something, but comparing it to a grid that's heavily subsidized and that does not include all the potential liabilities and externalities is not like for like.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Gracia. Florival, do you have something to say to that, given the potential, the discoveries, the gas discoveries in Mozambique, and of course, when that starts to, production kicks in and revenue starts to come into the economy, and Mozambique moves from, as you have said, country that is reliant on the World Bank, the IMFs of this world, to a sort of reliance economy. Would the revenue then be able to be invested into the renewable side of things, basically, into the renewable space, solar, wind, and so on and so forth?
Once again, I need to highlight the importance of the energy mix. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Like I said, we're very cognizant of the risks of climate change, the challenge that we're facing in terms of climate change. So really, once you start exploiting your natural resources, you have to look at diversifying your economy. And of course, you have to look at ways in which you can grow the economy in a sustainable manner. And we know that it may not be 2050, but somewhere in the distant future, we hope, we will need to reinvest the revenues from gas in different industries. And renewables is definitely one of those industries that we must, given the fact that, you are talking about clean energy, you are talking about reducing the carbon emissions. And it's important for Mozambique. Like I said, we had 2 deadly cyclones in the last 2 years. So we are very aware of the risks. But we are also fortunate to have low carbon gas, natural gas reserves. And we're very fortunate that we can actually start producing hydrogen. That is also a very clean source of energy. So yes, certainly Mozambique will look at renewables, but we think that we are lucky enough to have a more diverse source of energy in Mozambique.
Thank you. So I'd like to take you to the audience. This has been a rather large or long session. If anyone has any questions for our panel.
Apologies, Bimbola. Do you mind if I just give a quick note? Before we go to the audience questions, which I'm sure they're very pressed with, we would like to play the opening keynote video, which we could not play in the beginning because, load shedding. So it's about 5 minutes. So we're just going to be playing it. It's about Dignitary. And then once we do that, we'll just have a few minutes just to take about 2 questions. We'll have a quick break for nice and coffee and then come back for the 11 o'clock session. Is everyone fine with that? Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, let's load up the video. Thank you.
I'm delighted to be speaking to you all as part of the Africa Energy Week. I want to thank the organizers for hosting this event to discuss and strategize on pathways for a just, equitable, and inclusive energy transition for the continent. Having worked in the energy sector in Africa for many years, I have seen firsthand the transformative benefits that come with having access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy. And this is more than just household lighting using bulbs or solar lanterns. True access to sustainable energy transforms every aspect of human life, for household and businesses, for healthcare and food systems, and for economic growth and development. With less than 9 years left to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 7, access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, we need a range of stakeholders to work together. We need governments, we need funders, we need solution providers, and most importantly, we need communities. An integrated energy plan is a powerful tool that will help direct resources effectively and efficiently to where they need them the most. So, how do we get there? It starts with data. The availability, quality, and consistency of data will greatly enhance integrated energy plan for access and for energy transitions. This data, along with good governance, will allow for inclusive planning approaches and policy measures that can determine whether people be connected by the grid, mini grids, off-grid, hybrid solutions, and what are the best suited ways to provide electricity and associated energy services that meets the human need and contributes to sustainable economic development. In many regions, distributed renewable solutions like mini-grids have the potential to play a critical role in providing electricity to rural communities and businesses. Mini-grids can help connect the 759 million people around the world who currently do not have access to electricity. However, the mini-grid market is at its nascence, and despite its being the least cost option for many electrification connections around the world, it still needs some support. For example, in Nigeria, by the end of 2019, the estimated installed mini-grid capacity was at 2.8 megawatts, with 59 projects serving rural communities. Sustainable Energy for All, along with Bloomberg New Energy Finance, published a report last year that identified more than 5,000 operational mini-grids across sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and other regions, but that represents just a fraction of what is needed to electrify different populations. By improving regulatory frameworks, committing greater finance, and scaling up innovative business models, African countries have a unique opportunity to recover better with sustainable energy and to reset their economies by accelerating energy access and energy transitions. Now, more than ever, we need a thriving distributed renewable sector that can power critical infrastructure and small businesses, that can provide safe, clean, affordable, and reliable electricity to millions who currently live without. I once again want to thank the organizers of the African Energy Week 2021 for shining the light on this critical issue of ending energy poverty and enabling a just, equitable, and clean energy transition for all. Thank you very much.
A round of applause. Thank you so much. Can we please get the lights back on? All right, we have got literally about 3 minutes just to take Q&A. We've got 3 questions already. All right, we'll just have to stick to the 3 questions. As I mentioned yesterday, please can we keep the questions short and concise? Please, honorable speakers, please can we keep the responses short and concise? I'll truly appreciate it. I'll come right now, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll be very, very brief. My name is Kasukwere, former Minister of Environment in Zimbabwe. I've listened to this debate. I've been part of this debate before, climate, and we continue to be talking without acting. The talk shows, I think, must come to an end, and we start being practical. The meeting just now, COP, Glasgow, there was a lot of talk, energy transition, Africa must abandon coal, and I want to agree with my brother. If we abandon it now, what is the alternative? How do we do it? Let me say to you today that the current power matrix in Africa is still very much colonial. It is still serving those industries that are extractive in nature. The generality of our people do not have access to power. What I think would have been a solution, and this is what I think the African leadership must be discussing about, is how do we move forward? Let's be bold and clear. We have Ingadem, which can potentially power each and every hamlet in Africa. Now, before we talk about leaving coal, where are the dollars for us to get Ingadem working? That is a very clear transition. Give us the dollars, put them there, And as we start getting Inga running, we will also naturally abandon the coal because it becomes more expensive. Nobody wants to use this kind of power because we know what it means. But I think don't impose conditions without solutions. I heard the investors saying we need conditions for the private sector to invest in the energy transition. Colleagues, we are sick and tired of these conditions. We have worse conditions than the ones you're asking us. We're already living in a continent where there is no power for our people, where there is nothing that they can use for their sustenance. We think, as we bring you in to assist us, there should anyway be a very radical move by our own governments to get this power in place. Let's invest as African governments. And I think the AU meetings must seriously be about this issue. You can't go to Glasgow without a meeting and a position of how Africa is going to transit. We need our own plan. Anyway, I think I've taken too long, but this is my view. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
If I may, thank you, Your Excellency. It's not about conditions, it's about partnerships, sir. And that I've tried 3 times to bring 100% financing for solar deals to Zimbabwe. And so if you say there's a new spirit of wanting to do this, and then if we do enough of these, you won't do coal, then we're here. And I'd love to talk to you. But it's the Chinese who come in with those kind of conditions. You know, we'll lend you money, but then you have to put up your, mining assets or your port to take you. We only come in as partners, sir, and we come in with 100% financing. So if you're open for business, let's talk.
I deeply apologize. We're really running out of time. I know that there was a question right here. I reiterate, please may we keep it short and concise. Thank you. You can do it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Priya. My point is simple. I totally agree with you. To an ordinary woman on the street, our primary role is to put food on the table, whether it's our kids or for the rest of our family. We have not managed to bring that ordinary woman or that ordinary man from a level of bottom line consumption to our level as leaders. There's a huge gap, be it literacy, technical skills, capability, and most important, financing. We seem to think if we throw money at the problem, we're going to get them up to that level, and it's not going to happen. So at a lower level, what I'd like to see coming out of this forum is how do we engage with communities? How do we get them to accept and buy into this concept? I haven't seen it throughout. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a comment. We have one more comment for Dr. Ibrahim, and then we're going to close.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim, Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization. I don't have a question. I want to address some concerns expressed by the panelists. APO is part of this program, and I believe you've said you don't want all that has been discussed to be left here. We are going to have the first summit of heads of state of APO member countries in the first half of next year. And all the issues raised in the 3 days of this conference will be brought to the attention of the heads of state of APO member countries. I guarantee you that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you mind if we just close? Is anything that you want to close with?
No, just does anybody have anything to say? Just a second or two?
Yes, thank you. 6 years ago, in Paris, upon the signature of the Paris Agreement, there were pledges by Western countries. Pledges to assist African countries with funds and grants for us to start decommissioning the fossil fuels projects and start looking forward at renewables and the different energy mix. All I would like to say is that 6 years passed and the pledges were not fulfilled. We had COP26 now. There was no clear commitment. So the duplicitous behavior in which, on one hand, we have to start decommissioning. We should not put forward projects that will fund fossil fuels, be it coal, be it natural gas, be it oil. It's just not sustainable. So the message really is, let's come out with clear investment projects. Let's come out with what we would like to see as climate finance for African countries. And that entails grants. It doesn't entail loans because it's just forcing African countries to indebt themselves even further when they just can't afford it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to all the audience, especially when there was a power cut.
Sorry, Bimbola, Mr. Yusuf wanted to say something quickly.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for your presence and for bringing this to the world leaders. I just want to say, in addition to the extractive blessings that you've been given, which could be curses, you have the blessings here in Africa of everything you need, right? The sun, the wind, the water, the bio, the geothermal. I took an area from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, and today it's at 100% solar, and by 2025 it'll be 100% day and night solar, and that's our vision for Africa, and we would be honored to invest in any of your countries to be able to help that energy transition.
All right, once again, thank you to the audience for your patience, especially when there was a power cut. And thank you so much to the panelists, to Ambassador Peter Pham, to Gracia, to Joseph, and Florival. Thank you so much. I know there's still so many questions that you people have. Please grab any of the panelists and ask them more questions. Thank you, and enjoy what's left of the conference, and enjoy your time in Cape Town. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.